The alien queen raised her blade. Her child ran to the human instead. The colony world of Zurith had always been quiet, almost too quiet for the humans who had come to study and trade with the Zythurians. The towering structures of the alien city glowed with soft violet light, and strange, humming energy flowed through every street. Humans found it beautiful, but also unnerving. The Zythurians were not like any species they had met before. They were proud, disciplined, and feared by many across the galaxy for their strict rule and incredible combat skills. Evan had been assigned to this world as a diplomat. He had spent months learning their language, understanding their customs, and walking carefully through the delicate balance of politics. He knew one wrong move could spark a war. But even as he worked to keep peace, rumors swirled across the city. Something was happening that even the elders of the Zythurian Empire did not fully control. The heir of the Zythurian throne, Princess Lyra, had disappeared. Some whispered she had been kidnapped by rebels who wanted to challenge the queen. Others said she had gone into hiding herself, wanting freedom from the rigid rules that governed her life. The truth was unclear, but the result was the same. The Empire was on high alert. Queen Sorella, the mother of Lyra, was feared throughout the stars. Her reputation for strength and ruthlessness was legendary. She had led battles against entire fleets and had never once been defeated. Her blade was said to strike faster than the eye could follow, and her decisions were absolute. When she arrived on Zurith, the city trembled. Streets emptied, and even the most loyal citizens bowed in fear as her procession passed. Evan watched from a safe distance as the Queen's ship descended from the sky, casting a shadow over the alien city. He could feel the tension in the air. He had dealt with Zythurians before, but nothing prepared him for the raw power of their queen. He had no illusions about what would happen if she decided he or the humans were obstacles. The palace gates opened, and Sorella stepped out, her armor shining under the violet light. Her eyes swept over the crowd, piercing and unforgiving. Every guard and official fell silent, waiting for her command. Evan noticed the sharp glint in her hand, the hilt of her blade raised slightly, ready for action. This was a woman who would not hesitate to strike. And then from the chaos of the palace courtyard, a small figure appeared, Lyra. She ran not toward her mother as expected, but straight toward Evan. Every step she took was filled with purpose. The crowd gasped, whispers filled the air. A princess, the heir to the Zythurian Empire, choosing to run toward a human? It was impossible. Queen Sorella froze, her blade raised, uncertain. Rage, fear, and disbelief flashed across her face. She had raised Lyra to obey, to follow the rules without question. Yet here was her child, defying her in the most shocking way imaginable. Evan instinctively stepped forward, holding out his hands. "It's okay," he said softly, though his heart raced. He did not fully understand why Lyra was trusting him, but he could not ignore her plea. "I won't let anything happen to you." Lyra reached him, breathless but determined. She glanced back once at her mother, and in her eyes was a mixture of defiance and hope. "I trust him," she said simply. The queen's grip on her blade tightened. Her voice rang out, calm but deadly. "Do you understand what you are doing, Lyra? You are defying your empire. You are defying me." "I understand," Lyra replied, her voice steady. "But I cannot follow orders that hurt others. I cannot stay where people are in danger." A murmur ran through the palace guards. Some looked shocked, others confused. No one had ever heard the princess speak like this, openly challenging the queen. Sorella's eyes narrowed. She had expected fear, obedience, perhaps even tears, but Lyra had chosen courage. Evan knew they had little time. Guards would soon surround them, and the queen could act at any moment. He grabbed Lyra's hand, careful not to hurt her, and pulled her toward the alleyways leading out of the palace. She ran beside him, her small hand strong in his. The streets were eerily quiet. Some citizens peeked from behind walls, watching the princess and the human flee. Others fled entirely, afraid of being caught between rebellion and the queen's wrath. Evan and Lyra moved quickly, dodging patrols and using every narrow path to their advantage. "You're very brave," Evan said quietly, trying to calm his own nerves as much as hers. "I have to be," Lyra replied. "I cannot be like them, silent and obedient. I want to see a different future." They reached a tunnel beneath the city, an ancient network built long before even the queen's time. Here, the sounds of the city faded into distant echoes. Evan stopped for a moment to catch his breath, realizing just how far they had come. Lyra looked around, her wide eyes taking in the dimly lit passage. "This way," she said suddenly, leading him deeper into the tunnels. She moved with surprising skill, as if she had been here many times before. Evan followed, trusting her instincts. They came to a larger chamber where rebels waited. Shadows shifted as figures stepped out, weapons ready, eyes sharp. For a moment, Evan feared they had run straight into danger, but Lyra did not hesitate. "They won't hurt me," she said. "They want to speak to me, listen to me." The rebels looked at her with surprise. Few had seen the princess in person, and fewer still had expected her to come willingly. They lowered their weapons slightly, listening as Lyra explained her desire to understand their cause. Evan translated quietly, bridging the gap between human and Zythurian language. The rebels told a story that shocked Evan. They were not mere criminals or traitors. They had seen suffering, injustice, and fear among the Zythurian people. They sought change, not chaos. They wanted to end cruelty that even the queen could not fully control. Lyra listened carefully, nodding. "I see now," she said softly. "I see why you fight, but I do not want bloodshed. I want a solution where no one is hurt." Evan was amazed. This small princess, barely more than a child in human terms, had a wisdom beyond her years. He realized that courage was not just about fighting. It was about making choices that others could not. Meanwhile, above them, Queen Sorella's patrols searched for any sign of the missing princess. She had sent her most skilled warriors, but she herself had not moved from her position. She needed to see the truth of this situation before acting. Her instincts told her that something was happening she had not foreseen. Hours passed. The Queen's patrols found no trace of Evan or Lyra. The rebels argued quietly among themselves, unsure of whether to trust the human. But Lyra's calm presence convinced them that she meant no harm. She was different from the other rulers they had known, kind yet strong, brave yet wise. Evan and Lyra finally found a safe spot to rest. They sat in the shadows, catching their breath. Evan looked at the princess, still amazed at her composure. "You could have stayed in the palace," he said. "You could have listened and avoided all this danger. Why didn't you?" Lyra looked at him with eyes that reflected both fear and determination. "Because it is easier to follow orders than to do what is right," she said. "But I cannot be easier. I have to be brave. I have to choose the path that leads to a better world, even if it is dangerous." Evan nodded, understanding more than he expected. Humans often spoke of courage, but seeing it in action, especially in someone so young, was something else entirely. He realized that this moment, this choice, could change the future of the Zythurian Empire, perhaps even the entire galaxy. Far above them, Queen Sorella lowered her blade slightly. She had not struck, had not punished her daughter, but her mind was racing. She had always believed strength meant control, fear, and obedience. Yet Lyra had shown her another kind of strength, one built on trust, courage, and hope. For the first time, the queen questioned her own rule. Could a human teach her daughter something about leadership that she herself had not understood? Could she allow change without losing power? As Evan and Lyra moved deeper into the tunnels, a sense of purpose filled them. They were no longer just running. They were fighting for a future where humans and Zythurians could understand one another, where courage could change even the hardest hearts. And somewhere behind them, in the palace above, Queen Sorella watched and waited, the queen who raised her blade, now wondering if she would ever need to use it again. The night in the city of Zurith stretched on, filled with quiet tension, the distant hum of energy, and the hope of a new beginning. Lyra had chosen her path, Evan had joined her, and together they were about to face challenges that would test every skill, every choice, and every ounce of bravery they possessed. But for now, in the shadows of the ancient tunnels, they rested. They had survived the first step, and for the first time the impossible seemed possible. The tunnels beneath Zurith were dark and silent, except for the soft sound of their footsteps echoing off the stone walls. Evan led the way, careful not to trip over the uneven ground, while Lyra followed closely, her small hand gripping his. The air smelled of damp stone and ancient machinery, a reminder that this network of tunnels had existed long before even the Queen's reign. Lyra moved with surprising confidence. She knew the layout far better than Evan had expected. At times, she would pause and glance back, ensuring that no one had followed them from the palace. Her heart raced, but her face remained calm. She had made a choice, and now she had to live with it. Evan had spent hours watching the city from above ground, but down here he realized how little he truly knew about the Zythurians. The walls were lined with symbols and carvings that glowed faintly, showing scenes of history, battles, and rulers long gone. Some looked like warnings, others like celebrations of victories. Evan wondered how much of this history shaped the people above. After a few minutes, Lyra stopped in front of a hidden door carved into the stone. She pressed her palm against a symbol, and the door slid open silently, revealing a larger chamber inside. Shadows moved within, and Evan's heart jumped. The rebels were here. They had been expecting them. From the darkness, several figures stepped forward. They were tall, with lean frames, and their eyes were sharp and wary. They carried no weapons at first, only a cautious presence. Evan noticed a mix of fear and surprise on their faces. They had probably expected the princess to be guarded, maybe scared or crying, but instead, Lyra walked forward with her head held high. "I am Lyra," she said clearly. "I wish to speak." The rebels exchanged glances, unsure if they should listen. One of them, a woman with a scar across her face, stepped forward. "You are the princess?" she asked. "Why would you come to us? Why would you trust a human?" Lyra did not hesitate. "Because I want to understand. I want to know why you fight, and I want to see if we can find a better way. Not violence, not death, but change." Evan translated her words quietly into the rebels' language. The woman's eyes widened slightly, then softened. "Few of your people have courage like this," she said. "Most would have stayed in their palace, obeying blindly. You are different." Lyra nodded. "I cannot follow blindly. I cannot accept cruelty as normal. If my empire is to last, it must change. It must learn to protect, not only rule." The rebels looked at each other, murmuring. Evan could feel their tension, but he also saw a spark of hope. They had not expected to hear a princess speak like this. They had prepared for negotiation or perhaps confrontation, but not this. The woman with the scar, who seemed to be their leader, stepped closer. "You speak wisely," she said, "but the queen will not understand. She will see this as betrayal." "I know," Lyra replied, "and I am ready to face that, but I cannot stay silent while people suffer. I will not be a ruler who does not see the truth." Evan was impressed. He had worked with leaders before, but this child had wisdom that rivaled many adults he had met. He realized that bravery was not about fighting or winning. It was about standing for what is right, even when everyone else might oppose you. The rebel leader studied Lyra for a moment, then nodded. "We will listen," she said. "Tell us why you have come." Lyra spoke carefully, telling them about her life in the palace, about her mother's strict rules, and about the injustice she had begun to notice among her people. She spoke of fear, of loyalty demanded without question, and of the small voices ignored for centuries. The rebels listened silently, and Evan translated, making sure nothing was lost in the words. When she finished, the rebel leader stepped forward. "You have seen more in one day than most rulers see in a lifetime," she said. "You understand what we fight for, but do you understand the danger? Your mother will stop at nothing to bring you back. She may even destroy anyone who helps you." "I understand," Lyra replied. "But I will not run from what is right, and I believe there is another way, a way that does not hurt anyone unnecessarily." Evan nodded, quietly amazed. He had hoped to protect her, but now he realized that she was more than someone who needed protection. She was a leader in her own right, capable of making choices that could change the future. The rebels looked at each other, still unsure, but the air began to shift. Some stepped back, while others relaxed slightly. They had expected fear, but instead they saw confidence and intelligence. They had expected weakness, but they found strength. Hours passed as they discussed plans. The rebels explained their goals: to end the suffering of their people, to challenge the laws that caused injustice, and to create a society where loyalty and courage were rewarded, not fear. They wanted the princess's support, not as a pawn, but as an equal. Lyra listened carefully, asking questions and suggesting ideas. Evan helped where he could, translating and advising, but mostly he watched, amazed at her ability to grasp the situation. Every suggestion she made was thoughtful, practical, and brave. Outside, the city was tense. The Queen's patrols searched for any sign of the missing princess. Queen Sorella herself waited in the palace, her mind a whirlwind of anger, fear, and confusion. She had trained her daughter to obey, to follow rules without question, but now she had seen something she had not anticipated. The child had chosen her own path. The queen could not act blindly. She needed to understand what had happened before making a move. She had always trusted her instincts, but for the first time, those instincts told her that the situation was more complex than she had imagined. Back in the tunnels, Evan and Lyra moved deeper into the rebel base. They were shown small rooms filled with maps, communication devices, and supplies. The rebels were prepared for a long struggle, but Lyra did not see them as enemies. She saw them as people who wanted the same thing she did, a future where fear did not control life. "Can we work together?" she asked. "Can humans and Zythurians, leaders and rebels, find a solution without bloodshed?" The rebel leader looked at her carefully. "It is a risk," she said. "Many will not agree, many will see this as weakness, but perhaps. With you, it can be done." Evan smiled quietly. He had seen humans achieve impossible things before, but now he understood that sometimes the impossible began with a child who dared to speak truth. Lyra's courage was contagious. Hours turned into night and the tunnels became colder. Lyra and Evan found a quiet corner to rest. She leaned against him slightly, exhausted from the day's events. "I never thought I could do this," she said softly. "You're doing more than surviving," Evan replied. "You're changing the world, one choice at a time." Lyra smiled faintly, but her eyes were serious. "I have to be careful. Every step I take could be dangerous. The Queen, the Empire, even some rebels, they may not agree with me." "I know," Evan said, "but I will stay with you. We will face it together." The tunnels were silent again, but the sense of purpose hung heavy in the air. They had survived the first step. They had faced fear and defiance, and they had found allies in unlikely places. Suddenly, a faint noise echoed through the chamber. Both Evan and Lyra froze. The rebels tensed. Footsteps, soft but deliberate, moved closer. Evan's hand went to the small device at his belt, ready for anything. Lyra's hand gripped his. "It's okay," she whispered. "I can handle this." The shadows shifted and a figure appeared. Not a rebel, not a human, but a Zythurian warrior, one of the Queen's most skilled scouts. His eyes widened at the sight of Lyra standing with a human. He had orders to capture her, to bring her back immediately. But he paused, studying her calm, determined face. "You are the princess," he said, his voice low. "And you are with a human." Lyra nodded. "Yes, I am choosing my path. I am choosing to protect people, not follow orders blindly." The scout's gaze flicked to Evan. He had trained to distrust humans, to see them as weak and dangerous. But he saw something in Evan, a courage and loyalty that could not be ignored. Slowly, he lowered his weapon. "I do not fully understand," he said, "but I will not strike you, not yet." Evan exhaled quietly, feeling the tension ease. Lyra smiled faintly, her confidence unwavering. "Thank you," she said. The scout nodded and retreated into the shadows. The rebels relaxed further. For now, the immediate danger had passed, but Evan knew it would not be long before the Queen herself arrived to demand answers. Lyra looked at him, determination burning in her eyes. "We must keep moving," she said. "This is only the beginning. If we are to change anything, we must be ready for what comes next." Evan nodded. He realized that this was no longer just a mission of survival. It was a mission of hope, courage, and change. Together, human and princess, they were stepping into a future that no one had dared to imagine. And somewhere above them, the Queen's presence loomed, her eyes watching every shadow, every movement. She had not struck yet, but she was waiting, weighing, planning. For now, the tunnels offered safety, but the challenges ahead would test every skill, every choice, and every ounce of bravery they possessed. The night deepened, and the tunnels became a quiet place of strategy, reflection, and resolve. Evan and Lyra rested, but both knew that the dawn would bring new dangers, new revelations, and new choices that could change the Zythurian Empire forever. The tunnels beneath Zurith were quiet, but the quiet was heavy. Evan and Lyra moved carefully, guided by the rebels who had accepted her presence, if only for the moment. Each step echoed off the stone walls, a reminder that their safety was temporary. Lyra's small hand held Evan's tightly, her grip firm but calm. She had already faced fear, and yet she did not tremble. She was determined to understand the world beyond her palace walls. The rebels led them to a larger chamber, a space that had been long abandoned and repurposed as a meeting hall. Strange devices hummed softly, and maps of the city and surrounding areas were pinned along the walls. Here, the rebels discussed their strategy, planning for a future where the Zythurian Empire could be stronger and fairer, without relying on fear. Lyra stepped forward and looked at the maps. She had studied the Empire from books and advisors in the palace, but seeing it laid out like this gave her a different perspective. Roads, cities, outposts, and military bases were marked clearly. She could see where the Queen had power and where she might be vulnerable, Evan watched her closely. He had seen leaders before, but Lyra was different. She was young, yes, but her mind worked quickly and with clarity. She asked questions, suggested ideas, and considered consequences with care. She was already thinking like a ruler, one who wanted to protect rather than dominate. The rebel leader, the woman with the scar, stepped forward. "You see more than most," she said. "The queen rules with strength, but not all of her people are free. Many suffer quietly, afraid to speak. That is why we fight not to destroy, but to show a better way." Lyra nodded. "I see now," she said softly. "There are rules, traditions, and fear everywhere. Some of my people do not even know freedom exists. I cannot ignore that. I want to help them. But I do not want anyone to die. There must be another way." Evan translated her words carefully. The rebels listened with growing respect. Many had expected the princess to be naive, scared, or unwilling to speak. Instead, they found intelligence and courage. They had fought against the queen for years, but here was a young leader who understood their cause and sought a solution without unnecessary bloodshed. The discussion continued late into the night. The rebels told stories of cities where people lived in fear, of families punished for small mistakes, and of citizens who had no voice in their own lives. They described battles that had been fought not for survival, but for control, and the queen's warriors who enforced strict rules with little compassion. Lyra listened quietly, absorbing every detail. She could feel the weight of her responsibility pressing down on her. She had always known her empire was powerful, but she had never realized how many people suffered under its laws. And now she understood that change would not come easily. It would require courage, wisdom, and a willingness to challenge even those she loved. Evan spoke softly to her. "You are seeing things most rulers never notice," he said. "You have the chance to do something different, something better, but it will not be easy. You will face opposition even from your own mother." Lyra nodded. "I know. But I cannot ignore what is right. I will find a way to protect my people. I must." The night passed, and morning light began to filter through cracks in the tunnels. The city above was waking, unaware of the plans forming beneath its streets. Evan and Lyra moved to a smaller chamber away from the main meeting area where they could speak privately. "I need to know," Lyra said quietly, "what humans think of the Zythurians. Do you fear us? Do you think we are cruel?" Evan shook his head. "Humans fear what they do not understand," he said. "But they do not hate you. They respect strength, courage, and intelligence. They want fairness just as you do. I have seen humans and aliens work together before, and it can work. You just need to show them a path they can trust." Lyra thought about this. She had always been taught that humans were weak and fragile, incapable of surviving in her world. But Evan had already proven her wrong. He was brave, clever, and loyal. And he believed in her even when she doubted herself. "I do not know if my mother will ever understand," Lyra said. "She sees strength as control. She believes fear makes people loyal, but I think she is capable of more. I hope she is." Evan nodded. "She may be. But even if she is not, you can still lead in your own way. You can show your people a new kind of strength, one built on trust and courage." Lyra smiled faintly. "Then we have work to do," she said. "We must plan carefully. The queen will not wait. She will act soon." The rebel leader returned, sensing the urgency in the conversation. "You will need allies," she said. "Not just among us, but within the city. Some officials and citizens secretly support change. We can reach them, but it will be dangerous. The queen's spies are everywhere." Lyra's eyes brightened with determination. "Then we will find them. We will show them that there is a better way. And we will prepare for the queen's arrival. If she comes for me, she will see that I am not a child to be controlled. I am a leader in my own right." Evan helped her review the maps again. They discussed possible escape routes, safe locations, and people who might support them. Lyra's mind worked like a strategist, anticipating every possible challenge. She was no longer just running. She was planning, preparing, and learning how to lead. As they worked, the tension in the tunnels grew. The rebels were cautious, and Evan noticed the fear in their eyes. They had fought for years, yet the presence of the queen could undo everything they had built. One wrong move, one misstep, and chaos could return. Lyra sensed their worry. "We will not act recklessly," she said firmly. "We will protect everyone, human and Zythurian alike. That is our goal. We fight for hope, not revenge." Her words brought a sense of calm to the group. The rebels, inspired by her courage, began to speak more openly, sharing their knowledge and strategies. Evan translated, helping to build understanding and trust. Together, they began to form a plan, not for war, but for change. Suddenly, a message arrived through the rebel communication device. It was brief, urgent, and clear. The Queen's patrols had discovered a trail leading to the tunnels. She was sending her most trusted warriors to retrieve the princess immediately. Evan and Lyra froze. The moment of safety was over. The Queen would not hesitate to act, and the tunnels, no matter how secure, could not hide them forever. "We must move," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the fear in her heart. "We cannot wait for her to find us. We need to reach the city outskirts where we can contact allies and prepare for what comes next." The rebels nodded, quickly gathering supplies and preparing to guide them through hidden routes. Lyra and Evan moved with them, aware that every step could be dangerous. The walls of the tunnels seemed to close in around them, the weight of the Empire above pressing down like a storm. As they moved, Evan noticed the changes in Lyra. She was calm, focused, and courageous. She did not panic, she did not complain, and she did not hesitate. Every decision she made was thoughtful, precise, and brave. He realized that this young princess was capable of leading an empire, not through fear, but through wisdom and courage. Hours passed as they navigated the tunnels, finally reaching an exit that led to the outskirts of the city. The sun had risen fully now, casting a golden light over the alien landscape. Evan and Lyra paused, taking in the sight. For a moment, the tension faded, replaced by a sense of possibility. "We are not safe yet," Evan reminded her. "But we have made it this far, that is something," Lyra nodded. "And we will go further," she said. "We will find allies, protect the people, and show the Queen that there is another way. I will not fail." Evan smiled, feeling hope rising. The journey ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges, danger, and opposition. But with Lyra's courage and his support, he believed they could succeed. They were not just fleeing. They were building a path toward a future where humans and Zythurians could work together, where strength was measured by courage and compassion rather than fear. In the distance, the city loomed, a symbol of power, tradition, and authority. But now, within its streets and tunnels, a new plan was forming, one that could change everything. One that could challenge the Queen's rule not with violence, but with intelligence, courage, and hope. Lyra looked at Evan, determination shining in her eyes. "We must be ready for her," she said. "The Queen will come. She may not understand now, but she will see that I am choosing the future, not just following the past." Evan nodded. "And we will face it together. Whatever comes, we will be ready." The tunnels behind them grew silent again as the rebels retreated to their hidden base. Evan and Lyra stepped into the open, the sunlight warming their faces. For a moment, the world seemed full of possibility, and the dangers ahead felt smaller in comparison to the courage they carried. Somewhere above them, Queen Sorella prepared. She had discovered the trail and knew that her daughter had chosen a path she had not foreseen. The Queen's warriors moved quickly, but Sorella herself hesitated, unsure if she would strike immediately or wait to see what her daughter had learned. Lyra and Evan would have to act quickly. They had knowledge, allies, and courage, but the Queen's power was unmatched. The next encounter would test everything: loyalty, bravery, intelligence, and the ability to inspire change without violence. And for the first time, Evan understood something important. Humans often believed they were fragile compared to alien species, but he had seen strength in courage, wisdom, and hope. And with Lyra, that strength could challenge even the greatest queen in the galaxy. The sun rose higher over Zurith, casting light on streets, tunnels, and towers. A day of planning, danger, and decisions lay ahead. And Evan and Lyra together were ready to face it, step by step, with courage and hope guiding the way. The city above Zurith hummed with life, but beneath its streets, tension grew heavier with every passing moment. Evan and Lyra moved cautiously through the outskirts, guided by the rebels, but they knew time was running short. Queen Sorella would not wait long before acting. Her warriors were skilled, relentless, and trained to obey without question. The human diplomat and the young princess were walking into danger with every step. Lyra paused at a vantage point overlooking the city. Her eyes swept across the rooftops, the towers, and the streets below. The city seemed peaceful, but she knew appearances could be deceiving. Even here, the Queen's influence reached far and wide. Her daughter's choice to leave the palace had shaken the empire, and whispers of rebellion were already spreading. Evan stood beside her, silently calculating their options. "We need a plan," he said quietly. "We can't just run. She'll catch up and she'll be angry." Lyra nodded, her small hand brushing against the maps she carried. We won't run, we will face her, but not with weapons. We will show her that fear is not the only way to lead. There is another path. Evan raised an eyebrow. You really believe the Queen will listen? Lyra's eyes were steady. She may not now, but she will see. She has always been brave. She respects strength. And I am ready to prove that courage does not always come from violence. The rebel leader, the woman with the scar, approached. We have prepared the safe houses and escape routes, she said. But if you plan to meet the Queen, there is no room for mistakes. Her warriors are everywhere. Lyra nodded. I understand. I will not fail. Evan could not help but admire her courage. He had seen bravery before, but this was different. Lyra's courage was quiet, steady, and unwavering. It was not born of fear or desperation, but of a deep understanding that she could make a difference. As they moved through the narrow streets and hidden passages, the tension grew. Every shadow could hide a scout, every corner could conceal an ambush. Lyra stayed alert, guiding Evan and the rebels with careful precision. She knew the city well, and she used that knowledge to avoid patrols and find the safest paths. Hours passed, and finally, they reached a secluded area near the palace gates. Here, the rebels paused, knowing this was as far as they could go safely. Beyond this point, it would be Evan and Lyra alone. Lyra turned to the rebels. Thank you for helping us, she said. We could not have come this far without you. You have my gratitude. The rebel leader nodded. Be careful, she said. The Queen will not show mercy. But perhaps your courage will give her pause. With a final nod, the rebels disappeared into the shadows, leaving Evan and Lyra to face the palace and its ruler. The gates loomed ahead, guarded by soldiers, but Lyra did not hesitate. She walked forward with confidence, her head held high. Evan followed, ready for whatever awaited them. Inside the palace, Queen Sorella waited. Her blade rested at her side, and her eyes burned with intensity. She had learned of the princess's movements and knew that her daughter was outside the palace walls, guided by a human. Rage, fear, and disbelief battled within her. She had trained Lyra to obey, but her child had chosen her own path. The Queen's voice echoed through the hall as she spoke to the empty room. Lyra, you have defied me, she said. You have chosen a human over your own people. Come back now or face the consequences. Evan and Lyra entered the courtyard, their presence bold and deliberate. Soldiers stepped aside, sensing the tension between Queen and Princess. Evan felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon them, yet he stood firm. Lyra's hand brushed against his, a quiet gesture of reassurance. The Queen stepped forward, her blade raised in a defensive stance. You will not make this choice lightly, she said. Do you understand what is at stake? Lyra nodded. I do, and I am ready, but I will not be ruled by fear. I will lead with courage, not control. I hope you can see that. Evan watched as the Queen's eyes narrowed. Her gaze was sharp, measuring, and unyielding. She had fought entire armies and had never been defeated, yet now she faced a challenge unlike any before. A child who refused to obey, guided by intelligence and bravery rather than fear. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them was heavy with tension, anticipation, and the possibility of change. Soldiers held their breath, unsure if the Queen would strike or listen. Lyra stepped forward, her voice steady. Mother, I do not seek to overthrow you. I seek to protect our people. I want the Empire to be strong, but not at the cost of fear and suffering. We can lead together differently. Queen Sorella's grip on her blade tightened. She wanted to strike, to demand obedience, but she hesitated. She had always believed that strength required control, yet her daughter's words stirred something unfamiliar. Could bravery and courage be another kind of strength? Evan spoke quietly beside Lyra. She is listening, he said. She may not agree yet, but she is thinking. That is more than we could hope for. Lyra glanced at him briefly, then back at her mother. I am ready to show you, she said. I do not need to fight with weapons. I will show you through action, through choice, and through courage. The Queen's eyes flickered, a mixture of anger and curiosity. She had faced warriors, rebels, and enemies who challenged her authority, but none had ever spoken like this. None had dared to confront her with truth and hope rather than fear. Very well, she said at last. If you will not obey, then we shall see whose strength is greater, not through destruction, but through skill, strategy, and will. Are you ready, Lyra? Lyra nodded, standing tall. I am ready. The Queen raised her blade, but there was no malice in her stance, only focus and determination. Evan and Lyra understood that this would not be a battle of weapons, but a battle of wills. Lyra drew herself up, ready to prove that courage, intelligence, and compassion could rival even the greatest power. The duel began. Lyra moved with precision, avoiding aggressive strikes and responding with skill. She was not reckless. Every movement was calculated, every step purposeful. The queen tested her, striking with incredible speed and power, yet Lyra dodged and countered, showing agility and strategy. Evan watched in awe. He had expected danger, but he had not expected this. Lyra's skill was impressive, but more than that, her courage shone through. She did not flinch in the face of power. She met it with intelligence and determination. The queen's strikes were fast, sharp, and demanding, yet Lyra responded with calmness and focus. She moved not to harm, but to demonstrate capability and understanding. Each clash of blades rang out like a statement. Strength could be measured in courage, not fear. Minutes passed. Sweat gleamed on both their faces. Soldiers watched in silence, caught between awe and disbelief. The princess, guided by intelligence and bravery, faced the greatest warrior in the empire and held her ground. Finally, Lyra saw an opening. With careful precision, she disarmed her mother, knocking the blade from her hand without striking her. The queen stepped back, breathing heavily, her eyes wide with astonishment. "You have grown strong," Sorella said, her voice quiet but filled with respect. "Stronger than I expected." Lyra lowered her own stance, breathing steadily. "Thank you, mother. I do not seek to defeat you. I only wish to show that we can lead differently. We can protect, not only rule. We can inspire, not only demand." For a long moment, the queen said nothing. Then she slowly lowered her blade completely, a gesture that signaled more than surrender. It signaled understanding. She had seen her daughter's courage, wisdom, and determination. She had seen that strength could take many forms. Evan exhaled quietly, feeling the tension dissolve. The princess had not only survived, she had inspired respect and hope. The queen's warriors relaxed, and the air of fear in the courtyard shifted to one of cautious optimism. Lyra approached her mother carefully. "I want to work together," she said softly. "We can change the empire. We can lead with courage, fairness, and hope." Queen Sorella studied her daughter, her mind racing. She had always believed that control was the only path to strength, but now she saw another way. Perhaps this child, this young princess who had dared to defy and reason, could guide the empire toward a future she had never imagined. "I will consider your words," the queen said at last. "You have shown me courage and wisdom. Perhaps it is time for change." Lyra smiled faintly, relief and hope shining in her eyes. "Thank you, mother. I will not fail you nor our people." Evan watched silently, proud and amazed. He had seen humans inspire change before, but never like this. The courage of one child, paired with the right choices and understanding, had shifted the balance of power in an entire empire. The city outside continued to wake, unaware of the events that had unfolded in the palace courtyard. But within, a new path had begun, a path guided by courage, intelligence, and hope. And Evan knew that the days ahead, while still challenging, would be brighter because of what had just happened. Lyra had faced the greatest challenge of her life and had emerged not only unscathed but stronger. The queen had lowered her blade, and the empire had glimpsed the possibility of change. And for the first time, the impossible seemed possible. The palace courtyard was quiet now, a calm settling after the storm of tension. Queen Sorella stood with her blade lowered, her eyes thoughtful. For the first time in her life, she considered the possibility that strength did not come only from fear, control, and power. It could come from courage, wisdom, and trust. Lyra looked at her mother, her chest still rising with exertion from the duel. She had not sought to defeat the queen, only to prove that another kind of leadership was possible. And now, standing in the golden light of Zurith's sun, she felt hope. Hope that the empire could change, that the people could be free, and that humans and Zythurians could work together. Evan stood beside her, his hand brushing hers in quiet reassurance. He had never expected to witness such a moment. A human, guiding and supporting a princess in an alien empire, facing the greatest warrior in that world and seeing courage prevail. It was beyond anything he had imagined. The queen finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "You have shown me something I did not expect," she said. "Your courage, Lyra, is unlike anything I have seen, and your choices are wise. Perhaps it is time for the empire to see that strength can take many forms." Lyra stepped closer, her small frame standing tall against the imposing figure of her mother. "I want to help the people, mother," she said. "Not rule them with fear, but guide them with fairness and courage. We can work together, humans and Zythurians, to make a better world. Queen Sorella studied her daughter. She had always believed obedience and fear were the only paths to loyalty. But now she saw that the future could be different. Perhaps it was not too late to guide the empire in a new direction. Perhaps it was time to trust the next generation. Evan looked around at the soldiers and citizens watching from the edges of the courtyard. Their expressions were cautious but curious. The story of the princess had spread quickly. Her defiance, her courage, and her alliance with a human had begun to inspire hope among those who had long lived in fear. The queen lowered her head slightly. "You have challenged me, Lyra, and I see that you are capable of great leadership, but the road ahead will not be easy. The empire is vast, and not all will agree with your choices." "I know," Lyra said, "but we must start somewhere. We must show that courage, compassion, and intelligence are stronger than fear. We can lead by example, not by force." Evan translated her words for the surrounding Zythurians. Some nodded slowly, others exchanged uncertain glances. Change would be difficult, but it was possible, and now the spark of hope had been lit. The queen took a deep breath and looked toward the city beyond the palace gates. "Then we will begin," she said. "We will listen, we will learn, and we will guide the empire together. But remember, Lyra, leadership is responsibility. Every choice you make will affect lives. You must be wise, brave, and true." "I will," Lyra replied, her voice steady, "and I will not face it alone. We will build a future together, humans and Zythurians, rebels and loyalists, side by side." Evan felt a warmth in his chest. He had been sent to this world to negotiate peace, but he had become part of something greater. A child had shown courage, and together they had inspired change. This was humanity at its best, brave, compassionate, and wise, even in the face of uncertainty. The queen stepped forward, placing a hand on Lyra's shoulder. It was a gesture of trust and recognition, a silent acknowledgement that the princess had proven herself. Soldiers shifted, realizing that the queen's authority was now balanced by the promise of change. The empire's heart had begun to beat differently. Lyra turned to Evan, a small smile on her face. "We did it," she whispered. "We have taken the first step." Evan smiled back. "No, Lyra," he said softly. "You did it. I only helped. You showed everyone what courage can do." The princess looked out over the city, imagining the possibilities. Streets filled with people who could speak freely, leaders who would listen, and a society where strength was measured not by fear, but by bravery and wisdom. The thought was overwhelming, but she did not falter. She had seen what was possible, and now she would make it real. Over the next days, Lyra worked closely with the queen, carefully guiding her toward understanding the rebels' perspectives. Evan acted as a translator and advisor, bridging the gap between human and Zythurian ideas. Slowly, they began to implement small changes. Officials who had been silenced were allowed to speak, citizens were given more freedom in their daily lives, and the strictest rules were softened. The people noticed. Whispers of hope spread through the city like wildfire. Some were skeptical, others cautious, but many felt a spark of excitement for the first time in generations. The princess, guided by courage and intelligence, had begun to inspire change without violence. Even the rebels, who had once feared conflict, began to trust that Lyra's leadership could be different. They saw that their goals could be achieved without destruction, and they began to work openly with the palace. Plans were made for better communication, fairer trade, and more just laws. Evan watched as the empire slowly transformed. He realized that change was never simple, but it was possible when courage met wisdom. Humanity had played a small role, but Lyra's bravery had been the catalyst. She had shown that even in the face of fear, one person could inspire an entire society. One evening, as the sun set over Zurith, casting golden light across the palace towers, Lyra and the queen stood together on a balcony overlooking the city. The streets were calm, citizens moving freely, children playing where once they had been forbidden. "You have done well," the queen said quietly. "You have shown me a future I never imagined. I am proud of you, Lyra." Lyra smiled, her heart swelling with pride and hope. "Thank you, Mother. We are only beginning. There is still much to do, but together we can guide the empire toward a better future." Evan joined them, standing slightly behind. He looked at the city and then at the princess. "You have changed everything," he said softly. "Not just for your people, but for the entire empire. Courage and wisdom can do more than any weapon ever could." Lyra nodded. "And we will continue." Humans and Zythurians together, we will face challenges, yes, but we will face them with courage, intelligence, and hope. The Queen placed her hand on Evan's shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of his role. You have helped her see what I could not. For that, I thank you. Evan smiled quietly. I only followed her lead, he said. She is the true leader here. For the first time in generations, the Zythurian Empire felt a sense of possibility. Citizens spoke freely, leaders listened, and courage was recognized as strength. Fear no longer ruled. Hope had returned. Lyra knew the road ahead would not be easy. Change was always difficult, and there would be those who resisted. But she also knew that she was not alone. She had her mother, the Queen, she had allies among the rebels, and she had Evan, a human who had proven that courage and intelligence could bridge worlds. Together they would continue to guide the Empire, slowly, carefully, and with determination. Each decision, each choice would be made with wisdom and bravery, and each step would inspire others to follow. The sun dipped below the horizon, bathing the palace in soft golden light. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt the full weight and the full promise of leadership. She had faced fear, defiance, and danger, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to lead. Evan watched her, proud and hopeful. Humanity had played a small role, but the true hero had been the young princess who had dared to challenge an empire, who had chosen courage over fear, and who had shown that even the smallest voice could inspire change. Queen Sorella looked at her daughter, seeing not a child, but a leader capable of guiding the empire into a new era. She had feared defiance, but now she understood its power. Strength could take many forms, and courage could reshape even the greatest empire. Lyra turned to the city, imagining the lives that would be better, the families that would be protected, and the hope that would grow. She smiled, ready to face the challenges ahead, knowing that she had the wisdom, courage, and support to succeed. The empire had begun to change, slowly, carefully, and for the better. And somewhere in the hearts of humans and Zythurians alike, a new belief took root. Courage, intelligence, and hope were stronger than fear, and together they could build a future worth fighting for. The night settled over Zurith, calm and serene, but the sense of possibility lingered. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new choices, and new opportunities. But for now, Lyra had proven that even in the darkest moments, courage could light the way, and one child's bravery could change the fate of an entire empire. The human and the princess stood side by side, looking over the city. A new era had begun. And for the first time in generations, the impossible felt possible.